The tablet lit up on the nightstand while my body was splitting open. I wasn't supposed to see it. I was supposed to be breathing through the contraction that was tearing through my lower back like a rope being pulled too tight, too fast. I was supposed to be focused on the monitors beeping beside me, on the fetal heartbeat that sounded like a galloping horse, on anything except the glowing screen that showed me exactly who my man really was. But I saw it. I'm on my way now. Can't wait to see you. 5 words. That's all it took to kill the man I thought I knew. The message wasn't for me. It was from someone named Zora, a name I'd heard maybe twice, always in passing, always casual. Just someone from work, he'd said. I'd smiled and nodded because I trusted him. Because I was 8 months pregnant and glowing and stupid enough to believe that a man who kissed my belly every night couldn't possibly be kissing someone else during the day. Another contraction hit, and this time I welcomed the pain. Physical pain I understood. Physical pain had a beginning and an end. It had a purpose. My daughter was coming, and every wave of agony was bringing her closer to me. But the pain in my chest, the one that made my hands shake as I picked up that tablet and scrolled through messages I had no business reading but every right to see, that pain had no purpose. It was just destruction. I read them all. Every miss you, every can't stop thinking about last night, every heart emoji that should have been mine. And while my body prepared to bring life into this world, I watched my life as I knew it die in blue and gray text bubbles. Marcus was supposed to be stuck in traffic. That's what he'd told me 40 minutes ago when I called him, voice shaking, telling him it was time. Traffic's crazy, baby. I'm coming, I promise. I'd believed him because what else was I supposed to do? I was alone in a hospital room with my legs in stirrups and our daughter pressing down on my spine, like she was in a hurry to meet a father who couldn't be bothered to show up. But he wasn't stuck in traffic. He was with her. The nurse walked in, all smiles and efficiency, and asked me if I was okay. I must have looked like I was dying because her smile dropped fast. But I wasn't dying. I was waking up. And sometimes waking up feels a lot like death, especially when you realize you've been asleep for 2 years. I'm fine, I told her, setting the tablet face down on the nightstand like I could unsee what I'd just seen, like I could unknow what I now knew. She nodded, checked my vitals, told me I was dilating beautifully, and left me alone again. Alone. That's when it hit me. I'd been alone this whole time. I just hadn't known it yet. Which city are you watching this from? Drop it in the comments. I want to know where my people are at. I grew up believing that silence was a kind of strength. My grandmother used to say that a woman who knew how to be quiet knew how to survive. She'd sit on her porch in West End, shelling peas into a metal bowl, and tell me stories about women in our family who'd endured things I couldn't imagine. Women who'd buried husbands and raised children alone. Women who'd smiled through grief, because falling apart wasn't an option when there were mouths to feed and bills to pay. I thought I understood what she meant. But sitting in that hospital room, feeling my daughter's heartbeat through the monitor strapped to my belly while Marcus's tablet glowed with another woman's words, I realized I'd gotten it all wrong. Silence wasn't strength. Silence was what happened when you didn't have the language for your pain yet. It was the space between knowing something was wrong and knowing what to do about it. I was 22 weeks along when I first felt her move. It was late at night, and Marcus was asleep beside me, snoring softly with his hand resting on my thigh. I'd been lying there in the dark, thinking about names, thinking about nursery colors, thinking about whether I'd be a good mother. And then I felt it, a flutter, like a butterfly trapped inside me, trying to find its way out. I'd grabbed his hand and pressed it to my stomach, whispering, "Feel that? That's her." He'd smiled, eyes still closed, and mumbled something about how amazing I was before rolling over and falling back asleep. I should have known then, should have recognized that moment for what it was, me, trying to pull him into something he wasn't fully present for. But I didn't. I just lay there with my hand on my belly, feeling her move, telling myself that everything was exactly as it should be. The contractions started around 6 in the morning. I was in the kitchen making tea when the first one hit, a tightening across my abdomen that made me grip the counter and breathe through my teeth. I'd been having Braxton Hicks for weeks, so at first I thought it was nothing. But then another one came, 20 minutes later. And then another. By 9 o'clock, I knew it was real. Marcus was in the living room on a video call with a client. I could hear him through the door, voice smooth and professional, talking about investment portfolios and market trends. I waited for him to finish, timing my contractions on my phone, watching the numbers get closer together. 12 minutes, 10 minutes, 8. When he finally came into the kitchen, he was smiling, energized the way he always was after closing a deal. "That went great," he said, pouring himself coffee. "We're looking at a serious payout if this goes through." "Marcus," I said quietly. "It's time." He looked at me, coffee cup halfway to his lips. "Time for what?" "The baby. I'm having contractions." I watched his face change. The smile stayed, but something behind his eyes shifted. It wasn't fear exactly. It was more like inconvenience. Like I'd just told him we had to reschedule a dinner reservation. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I mean, how far apart are they?" 8 minutes. Okay. He set the coffee down, ran his hand over his fade. I need to send a few emails, make sure everything's covered. You know how it is. I did know how it was. I knew that his work always came first. That I'd spent the last 9 months accommodating his schedule, going to doctor's appointments alone because he had meetings, painting the nursery by myself because he was on a call. I knew that I'd been making excuses for him since the day I peed on that stick and showed him the 2 pink lines. But I didn't say any of that. I just nodded and went upstairs to finish packing my hospital bag. By the time I was ready to leave, the contractions were 6 minutes apart, and Marcus was still at his computer. I stood in the doorway of his office, overnight bag over my shoulder, keys in my hand. "I'm going to head to the hospital," I said. He glanced up, distracted. "Now? Don't you think we should wait a little longer?" "I'm a labor and delivery nurse, Marcus. I know when it's time." "Right. Yeah, of course." He stood up, looked around like he was trying to remember what he was supposed to do. "I just need to finish this one thing. It'll take 10 minutes tops. You go ahead and I'll meet you there." I stared at him, this man who'd promised to be by my side, who'd held my hand at the ultrasound and said he couldn't wait to meet our daughter, who'd kissed me that morning and told me I looked beautiful even though I was swollen and exhausted and hadn't slept through the night in weeks. "You'll meet me there," I repeated. "Yeah, I'll be right behind you." "Traffic shouldn't be too bad this time of day." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that this was it. That our daughter was coming. That he needed to stop pretending his emails were more important than this moment. But I didn't. Because silence was what I knew. Silence was what I'd been taught. So I left. I drove myself to Atlanta Medical Center with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, breathing through contractions at red lights, telling myself he'd show up. That he'd walk through that door with flowers and apologies, and everything would be fine. The nurse who checked me in was kind. She had gentle hands and a soft voice, and when she saw that I was alone, she didn't ask questions. Just got me into a gown, hooked me up to the monitors, and told me I was doing great. "Is someone coming?" she asked, adjusting the fetal monitor on my belly. "My boyfriend," I said. "He's on his way." She nodded, smiled, and left me alone in room 421. That's when I saw the tablet. Marcus must have left it that morning when he'd been getting ready for his call. It was sitting on the nightstand, plugged into the charger, screen dark. I hadn't even noticed it until now. I reached for my phone to call him, to tell him I was here, that everything was progressing fast, that he needed to hurry. But before I could unlock the screen, another contraction hit, harder than the others, and I dropped the phone onto the bed. That's when his tablet lit up. One notification, one message, one truth I wasn't ready for. "I'm on my way now. Can't wait to see you." From Zora. I picked up the tablet with trembling hands. I knew I shouldn't look, knew that whatever I found would change everything. But I couldn't stop myself. I opened the messages, and I read them all. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself all at once. It comes in fragments. Little pieces of truth that your brain tries to fit together, but can't, because the picture they're forming is too ugly to accept. So you tell yourself you're wrong, that you're reading too much into things, that the sick feeling in your stomach is just pregnancy hormones or stress or anything, accept what it actually is. I'd been telling myself I was wrong for months. The first message I saw was from 3 days ago. Zora. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Marcus. Same. When can I see you again? Zora. Whenever you want. You know I'm always free for you. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the tablet. Another contraction was building. I could feel it gathering in my lower back, but I couldn't stop reading. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, horrifying, but impossible to look away from. I scrolled up. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Marcus. She's asleep. Can you talk? That message was from a month ago. I remembered that night. I'd been exhausted, 36 weeks pregnant, my feet so swollen I couldn't wear anything but slides. I'd fallen asleep on the couch while we were watching a movie, and when I woke up around midnight, Marcus wasn't there. I'd found him on the back porch, phone pressed to his ear, voice low. Just a client, he'd said when I asked. West Coast time difference. You know how it is. I'd believed him. I'd kissed his cheek, waddled back to bed, and fallen asleep feeling grateful that he worked so hard for us. Us. There was no us. There never had been. The contraction hit then, hard and mean, radiating from my spine around to my belly like a belt being tightened by someone who hated me. I gasped, gripping the bed rail, trying to breathe the way I'd taught hundreds of other women to breathe. In through the nose, slow and steady. Out through the mouth, even slower. But all I could think about was her name. Zora. I'd met her once, maybe twice. Marcus had a company mixer back in February. Some rooftop thing in Midtown with craft cocktails and people in expensive sneakers. I was 5 months pregnant, uncomfortable in a dress that barely fit, and Marcus had introduced me to half a dozen people whose names I forgot immediately. Zora had been one of them. She was beautiful in that Instagram way. Perfect makeup, bone-straight wig, outfit that probably cost more than my rent. She'd smiled at me, bright and empty, and said something about how glowing I looked. I'd thanked her, placed my hand on my belly out of habit, and watched Marcus laugh at something she said. I hadn't thought anything of it. Why would I? I was secure. We were having a baby. We were building a life. I scrolled further back, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. The messages went back 7 months. 7 months of, I miss you, and can't wait to see you, and late-night phone calls that I'd been too naive or too tired or too in love to question. There were photos, too. Nothing explicit, but intimate enough. Her in his car. Him at a restaurant I didn't recognize. A selfie of them together, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Both of them smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. The timestamp on that photo was 2 weeks ago. I'd been having Braxton Hicks that day. Bad enough that I'd called Marcus at work, scared, asking him to come home. He'd told me he was in a meeting he couldn't leave. I'm sure you're fine, baby, he'd said. Just rest. I'll be home in a few hours. He'd come home around 9 that night, smelling like cologne and carrying takeout from my favorite restaurant. An apology, I'd thought. He'd kissed my forehead, rubbed my feet while we ate, and told me he loved me. I'd believed him. God, I'd believed everything. Another message came through while I was staring at the screen, and this time, I watched it appear in real time. Zora. Where are you? I'm getting impatient. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could respond. I could pretend to be him. I could blow up his entire world the way mine was currently imploding. But what would that accomplish? He'd lie. He'd make excuses. He'd gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting or misunderstanding or being hormonal. And I'd be sitting here, in labor, fighting with a man who clearly didn't deserve another second of my time. No. I set the tablet back down on the nightstand, screen facing up. Let it buzz. Let her wonder. Let him panic when he finally showed up and realized what I'd seen. The nurse came back in, a different one this time, younger with box braids and kind eyes. "How are we doing, Mama?" she asked, checking the monitor. "Progressing," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She looked at the readout, nodded approvingly. "You're at 6 centimeters, moving right along. Is your support person here yet?" Support person. I almost laughed. Almost told her that my support person was currently ignoring messages from his side piece while I was about to push his child into the world. But I didn't. I just shook my head. "He's on his way," I said, because what else was there to say? She gave me a sympathetic smile, the kind that said she'd seen this before, that she knew exactly what "on his way" meant when a woman showed up alone to deliver a baby. "Well, you're doing amazing," she said. "You need anything? Ice chips? More pillows?" "I'm good." She lingered for a moment like she wanted to say something else, then thought better of it. "I'll check on you in 20 minutes. When she left, I picked up my phone. Marcus had called twice. There were 3 unread texts. Marcus: "Hey, leaving now. Be there soon." Marcus: "Traffic is crazy. I'm moving as fast as I can." Marcus: "You okay? Why aren't you answering?" I stared at the messages for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond. Wanted to scream at him through the phone, tell him I knew everything, that he was a liar and a coward and I never wanted to see him again. But I didn't. Because silence, I was learning, could be a weapon too. I turned, my phone face down on the bed next to his tablet, and closed my eyes. Another contraction was coming. I could feel it building, slow and inevitable, like a wave gathering strength before it crashes. I breathed through it, hands gripping the bed rail, focusing on the only thing that mattered now. My daughter was coming, and when she got here, she was going to meet a mother who loved her more than anything. A mother who was strong enough to walk away from a man who didn't deserve her. A mother who would teach her that silence wasn't about survival. It was about choosing your battles. And this battle, it was already over. Marcus just didn't know it yet. The tablet buzzed again. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I already knew everything I needed to know. Pain has a way of clarifying things. When you're in the middle of it, real, bone-deep, unignorable pain, all the noise falls away. The excuses you've been making, the lies you've been telling yourself, the version of reality you've been clinging to because the truth is too devastating to face, all of it disappears. And what's left is just you and the raw, undeniable facts of your life. I was 7 centimeters dilated, and every contraction felt like my body was trying to turn itself inside out. But the physical pain was almost a relief. It gave me something to focus on besides the wreckage of my relationship scattered across a glowing tablet screen. I thought about the first time I met Marcus. It was at a friend's birthday party in Piedmont Park, one of those warm September evenings where the whole city seemed to be outside. I'd been sitting on a blanket with my girls, drinking wine from a plastic cup, laughing at something I don't even remember anymore. And then he walked over. He was confident in a way that didn't feel arrogant. Smiled like he already knew I'd say yes before he even asked for my number. We talked for 2 hours straight, about everything and nothing. His job, my nursing career, our favorite spots in the city, where we saw ourselves in 5 years. "I want a family," he'd said, looking right at me with those warm brown eyes. "Someone to build something real with. I'm tired of playing games." I'd believed him. Of course I had, because I wanted the same thing. I was 29, watching all my friends get married and have babies, wondering when it would be my turn. And here was this beautiful man telling me he wanted exactly what I wanted. 3 months later, we moved in together. 6 months after that, I got pregnant. And now, 2 years into this relationship, I was realizing I'd built my entire life on a foundation of pretty words and broken promises. Another contraction seized me, and this time I couldn't hold back the moan that escaped my lips. The pain radiated from my lower back, wrapping around my sides like a vice grip. I gripped the bed rail so hard my knuckles went white, breathing through my teeth the way I'd taught countless women to do. Breathe through it, Mama. You've got this. The pain has a purpose. That's what I always said, what I believed. But right now, the only purpose I could see was that it was preparing me to meet my daughter alone, to become a single mother, to raise a child without the father I'd promised her would be there. I'd been so careful, so intentional. I remembered the conversation we'd had when I first found out I was pregnant. We were sitting in our kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd told him I was in labor this morning, and I was terrified. We'd only been together 6 months. It wasn't planned. I didn't know what he'd say. But he'd pulled me into his arms and held me tight. "We're going to do this," he'd whispered into my hair. "You and me. We're going to be amazing parents." I'd cried then, relief flooding through me, believing that we were on the same page. That we were a team. What a fool I'd been. The tablet buzzed again. I didn't look, but I knew it was her. Zora, the woman who'd been sleeping with my man while I was growing his child. The woman who probably had no idea I even existed, or if she did, didn't care enough to stop. I wondered what he'd told her about me. If he'd mentioned me at all, or maybe I was just his baby mama. Maybe he'd painted me as some obligation he was stuck with, some burden he had to tolerate while he lived his real life with her. The thought made me sick. I thought about all the times I'd rearranged my life for him, switching shifts at the hospital so I could be home when he needed me, skipping girls' nights because he wanted to stay in, making excuses to my family when he didn't show up to dinners or birthdays. My grandmother had seen through him from the beginning. "That boy got a wandering eye," she'd said the first time she met him. We were at her house for Sunday dinner, and Marcus had spent most of the meal on his phone. "You watch yourself with that one, Amina." I defended him, told her he was just busy with work, that she didn't understand how demanding his job was. She just looked at me with those knowing eyes that had seen too many women make the same mistakes, and said nothing else. She'd died 3 months ago. Stroke. Quick and painless, the doctor said. I was 5 months pregnant, and Marcus didn't come to the funeral. Said he had a work trip he couldn't cancel. I'd sat in that church alone, watching them lower my grandmother into the ground, wishing she was still here to tell me I told you so, because she had. She'd seen exactly what I was too in love, or too desperate to see. Another contraction hit, stronger than the last. I could feel my daughter moving down, pressing against my cervix, ready to make her entrance into this broken world I'd brought her into. The monitor beside me showed her heartbeat. Strong, steady, perfect. She was fine. She was healthy. She was going to be okay. And so was I. That realization hit me harder than any contraction. I was going to be okay. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. Because I'd survived worse than this. I'd survived losing my grandmother, the woman who raised me. I'd survived nursing school while working 2 jobs. I'd survived every patient I'd lost, every emergency delivery that went wrong. Every night I'd come home crying because I couldn't save everyone. I could survive this too. The door opened, and the nurse with the box braids came back in. She glanced at the monitor, then at me, her expression shifting from professional to concerned. "You doing all right, honey?" I nodded, even though tears were streaming down my face. I hadn't even realized I was crying. She came to my bedside, placed a cool hand on my forehead. "Your vitals are good. Baby's doing great. You're at 8 centimeters now. We're getting close." "I know," I whispered. She hesitated, then asked quietly, "Is he coming?" I knew who she meant, and I knew she already knew the answer. "I don't know," I said. And then, more honestly, "I don't care." She nodded like she understood, like she'd been here before. Maybe not in this exact situation, but close enough. "You don't need him," she said firmly. "You've got this. I've seen women do this alone 100 times, and they're always stronger than they think. You're going to be just fine." I wanted to believe her. Part of me did. But another part, the part that had been planning a future with Marcus, that had imagined him in the delivery room holding my hand, that had picked out our daughter's name together, that part was grieving. I was mourning a man who was still alive. Mourning a relationship that had died months ago. I just hadn't noticed. Mourning the father my daughter would never have. Not because he was gone, but because he'd chosen not to be present. The nurse squeezed my hand and left. And I was alone again with my thoughts and the steady beep of the fetal monitor and the ghost of the life I thought I'd have. My phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus. Marcus, baby, please answer. I'm almost there. I love you. I stared at those 3 words. I love you. Words he'd said 1,000 times. Words I'd believed meant something. Words that, looking back, had always been just a little too easy for him to say. Love wasn't just words. Love was showing up. Love was being present. Love was choosing someone every single day, especially on the hard days. Marcus had never chosen me. He just told me he had, and I'd been too busy choosing him to notice. There's a moment in every labor where you have to decide whether you're going to fight or surrender. It usually comes during transition. That space between 8 and 10 centimeters when your body is doing things you can't control, when the pain is so consuming that rational thought becomes impossible, when every instinct tells you to run, even though there's nowhere to go. I'd coached women through this moment hundreds of times, held their hands, looked them in the eyes, told them they were stronger than they knew, that they just had to get through the next contraction, and then the next one. And before they knew it, they'd be holding their baby. What I never told them, what I couldn't tell them, was that the real transition wasn't physical. It was the moment you realized you were about to become someone completely different, that the person you were before labor started would never exist again, that there was no going back, only through. I was in that moment now, and it had nothing to do with my cervix. The nurse came back with paperwork on a clipboard. She was trying to be discreet, professional, but I could see the pity in her eyes. She'd probably watched this scene play out 12 times. Woman in labor, man nowhere to be found, everyone pretending like it was fine when it clearly wasn't. "We need to start on the birth certificate information," she said gently, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "We can wait if you want, but it's easier to do it now before things get too intense." I nodded, wiping the sweat from my forehead. Another contraction was building, but it wasn't here yet. I had maybe 2 minutes. She clicked her pen, poised over the form. "Okay, baby's last name." "Cole," I said. "My last name, not his." She wrote it down without comment, though I saw her eyes flicker with understanding. Mother's full name and date of birth. I gave her the information, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. And father's information? The question hung in the air between us. I could give her Marcus's name. Could fill out the form the way we'd planned, the way I'd imagined it would go, his name next to mine, making it official. Making us a family, but we weren't a family. We never had been. A family required presence, commitment, honesty, and Marcus had given me none of those things. He'd given me pretty words and empty promises and a relationship that looked good from the outside but was rotting from within. "Leave it blank," I said. The nurse's pen stopped moving. She looked up at me, searching my face for certainty. "Are you sure? You can always add it later if—" "I'm sure." She held my gaze for another moment, then nodded and drew a line through that section of the form. "Okay, and baby's first name?" We'd chosen it together months ago. We'd been lying in bed, my belly pressed against his back, and he'd suggested it. "Zori," he'd said. "It means beautiful, like her mother." I'd loved it, loved him for suggesting it. Loved the way it sounded when he said it out loud. Testing it, imagining calling our daughter's name across a playground someday. But that memory was contaminated now. Every sweet moment we'd shared was now suspect, tainted by the question of whether he'd been with her before or after. Whether he'd been thinking about her while he was lying next to me. Whether any of it had ever been real. "Amara," I said. It was my grandmother's middle name. "Amara Grace Cole," the nurse smiled. "That's beautiful." "Thank you." She finished filling out the form, had me sign in 3 places, and then she was gone again, taking the paperwork with her. Taking Marcus's last chance to be legally connected to this child. I looked at the tablet again. It had been buzzing periodically for the last 20 minutes, but I hadn't touched it. Didn't need to. I already knew what the messages said. More excuses, more lies. More proof that I'd been right to remove his name from that birth certificate. My phone rang. Marcus. I watched it vibrate on the bed, his name flashing across the screen, and I didn't answer. Let it go to voicemail. Let him wonder. Let him feel a fraction of the abandonment I'd been feeling all morning. All year, really. Because this wasn't just about today. This wasn't just about him being late to the hospital or sleeping with Zora or forgetting to show up when I needed him most. This was about every time he'd chosen himself over us, every missed appointment because of work, every promise broken because something more important came up, every night I'd fallen asleep alone while he was out with clients, every morning I'd woken up feeling more like a roommate than a partner. I'd been making excuses for him for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to expect more, to demand more, to believe I deserved more. But carrying this baby had changed something in me. Maybe it was hormones. Maybe it was biology. Some primal instinct to protect my child at all costs. Or maybe it was just that becoming a mother had forced me to look at my life honestly, for the first time in years, and what I saw made me sick. Saw a man who said he loved me but couldn't. Stay off his phone during dinner. Who promised to be there but was always somewhere else. Who talked about our future but lived entirely in his present. I saw a woman, me, who'd shrunk herself to fit into his life. Who'd convinced herself that love meant sacrifice, even when she was the only one sacrificing anything. Who'd accepted crumbs and called them a feast because she was terrified of being alone. But I wasn't terrified anymore. Another contraction hit, brutal and demanding, and I screamed. Not from pain, though God knows there was plenty of that, but from rage. From grief. From the sheer injustice of being in this moment alone, when I should have had someone beside me telling me I was doing great. That they were proud of me. That they loved me. The door flew open and 2 nurses rushed in. The one with the box braids and an older woman I hadn't seen before. "You're okay, honey," the older nurse said, checking the monitor. "That's just transition. You're almost there, but I was already there. Already transitioned. Already someone new." The old Amina would have answered Marcus's calls. Would have listened to his excuses, believed his lies, given him another chance. Would have added his name to that birth certificate because she was too afraid of doing this. Alone. But the new Amina, the one being born in this hospital room alongside her, daughter. She knew better. She knew that being alone was better than being with someone who made you feel alone. That her daughter deserved better than a part-time father who showed up when it was convenient. That she deserved better than a man who split his attention, his affection, his entire life between 2 women like neither of them was enough. My phone rang again. Marcus again. This time I picked it up, not to answer, but to turn it off completely, to silence it, to make a choice. "Good," the older nurse said, seeing what I'd done. "You don't need any distractions right now. Just focus on you and this baby. You and this baby. Not you 3, not your family, just us. Just me and Amara, and maybe that was okay. Maybe that was more than okay. Maybe that was exactly what we needed." The contraction eased, and I lay back against the pillows, exhausted but clear-headed. Clearer than I'd been in months. I'd made my decision. Signed the papers. Removed him from her life before she even took her first breath. Some people might call it cruel. Might say I was punishing him, being vindictive, letting my anger make decisions I'd regret later. But this wasn't anger. This was protection. I was protecting my daughter from the pain of watching her father choose everyone and everything else over her, from learning that love was supposed to feel like neglect, from growing up thinking she had to shrink herself to earn someone's attention. I was protecting myself from another 2 years, or 10, or 20, of making excuses for a man who would never change, who would always have one foot out the door, who would teach our daughter by example that women were supposed to wait patiently while men did whatever they wanted. No, not my daughter. Not anymore. The tablet buzzed one more time. I picked it up, looked at Zora's latest message. "Where are you? This isn't funny." And I almost laughed. She had no idea what was coming, what she'd won. The prize of Marcus Reed, part-time partner, full-time disappointment. She could have him. I set the tablet back down and closed my eyes, feeling my daughter move inside me. She was almost here, almost ready to meet the world, and when she did, she'd meet a mother who'd chosen her over everything else, even her own broken heart. He walked in like he was the hero of the story. That's what killed me most. Not that he was 3 hours late. Not that he'd missed my entire labor. But that he walked through that door with a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite, and a smile that said he expected to be forgiven just because he'd finally shown up. I was 9 centimeters dilated. The nurses had told me not to push yet, that I needed to wait, but my body didn't care about their timeline. Every contraction felt like my daughter was clawing her way out, desperate to escape, and I was holding on by sheer force of will. And then there he was, Marcus. In his expensive joggers and fresh white sneakers, not a hair out of place, smelling like that cologne he knew I loved. "Baby," he said, rushing to my bedside. "I'm so sorry. You won't believe what happened." I held up my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Not because I was ready to hear his excuse, but because another contraction was cresting, and I needed every ounce of concentration to breathe through it. He stood there awkwardly, flowers dangling from his hand, watching me grip the bed rail and moan through clenched teeth. When it finally passed, I opened my eyes and found him staring at me with something that looked almost like fear. "Good," I thought. "Be afraid. Where do you want these?" he asked, gesturing with the sunflowers. I almost laughed. After everything, after the messages, after Zora, after leaving his name off the birth certificate, he was asking me where to put flowers. "Anywhere," I said flatly. He set them on the windowsill, fussing with them unnecessarily, avoiding my eyes. When he finally turned back to me, his smile was strained. "The traffic was insane," he started, and I could hear the lie forming in real time. There was an accident on 85, and then my car started overheating and I had to pull over. "Marcus." My voice was quiet, but it cut through his rambling like a knife. He stopped talking, finally meeting my gaze. "I don't want to hear it," I said. "But I need you to understand." I said, "I don't want to hear it." There was something in my tone that made him go still. I watched his face change, confusion bleeding into defensiveness. This wasn't how these conversations usually went. Usually I listened, I nodded. I accepted whatever explanation he offered, because the alternative, calling him a liar to his face, felt too confrontational, too mean, too much like giving up. But I'd already given up. I'd given up hours ago when I read those messages, when I signed that birth certificate, when I turned off my phone and decided that whatever came next, I'd face it on my own. He pulled up a chair, sat down heavily, and ran his hand over his face. "Amina, I know you're in pain right now, and I know I should have been here sooner. Where were you?" The question hung between us, simple, direct, unavoidable. "I told you. There was traffic. Where were you, Marcus?" He blinked, thrown by my insistence. I was trying to get here. I left as soon as I could. Was Zora worth it? The name landed like a slap. I watched the color drain from his face, watched his mouth open and close without sound, watched him realize in real time that everything he thought was hidden had been exposed. What are you?" "Your tablet," I said, gesturing to the nightstand where it still sat, screen dark but damning. "You left it here this morning. Zora's been messaging you all day, very concerned about where you are." He reached for the tablet instinctively, then stopped himself, like touching it would make everything worse. His hands hovered in the air for a moment before dropping to his lap. "Amina, how long?" I asked. My voice was still quiet, still calm, but there was steel underneath now. "How long have you been sleeping with her?" It's not what you think. How long?" He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the moment he understood there was no talking his way out of this. No smooth explanation that would make it okay. No charm or deflection that would work this time. 7 months, he whispered. 7 months. I'd been 4 months pregnant when it started, just beginning to show, just starting to feel her move inside me, just beginning to imagine what our life would look like as a family. And he'd been sleeping with someone else. Did you ever actually love me? I asked. Or was I just convenient? Don't say that. He leaned forward, reaching for my hand, but I pulled away. You know I love you. This thing with Zora, it didn't mean anything. It was just what? Just fun? Just physical? Just something to do while I was home growing your child? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Marcus? Explain it to me. Help me understand how you could look at me every day, kiss me, tell me you loved me, tell me you couldn't wait to meet our daughter, and then go spend time with another woman. Help me understand that. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, but no explanation came, because there wasn't one. There was no version of this story where he was anything other than exactly what he was. A coward who wanted everything and was willing to lie to get it. Another contraction hit. Harder than before, and I couldn't hold back the scream this time. The nurse with the box braids rushed in, took one look at the monitor, and called for the doctor. We're ready, she announced. Baby's coming now. Marcus stood up, looking panicked. Do you want me to get out? I said through gritted teeth. What? Get out. Amina, I'm not leaving you. You already did. I looked at him, this man I'd loved, this man I'd built my life around, and I felt nothing but exhaustion. You left me months ago. You just forgot to tell me. The doctor came in then, a composed black woman in her 50s who'd checked on me twice already. She glanced between Marcus and me, assessing the situation with practiced efficiency. We need to focus on delivery now, she said crisply. Sir, if you're staying, you need to be supportive. If you can't do that, you need to leave. Marcus looked at me, desperate. Baby, please, let me stay. Let me be here for this. I thought about it. For half a second, I actually considered it. Considered letting him stay. Because that's what I'd imagined. What I'd wanted. What I'd planned for. Considered it because some part of me still loved him, or at least loved who I thought he was. But then I thought about my daughter. About what it would mean to let him into this moment. About the precedent it would set. That he could betray me, disrespect me, abandon me, and still get to be present for the most important moment of my life. No, I wouldn't do that to her. Wouldn't teach her that love looked like accepting crumbs from men who gave their whole meals to someone else. Leave, I said again, firmer this time. I don't want you here. Amina, sir. The doctor's voice was sharp now. The patient has asked you to leave. I need you to respect that. Marcus stared at me like I'd stabbed him, like I was the one doing something wrong, like I was being cruel or unreasonable or vindictive instead of just protecting myself and my daughter from his toxicity. You can't do this, he said, voice rising. That's my daughter too. No, I said, and my voice was ice. She's my daughter. You're just the man whose name isn't on her birth certificate. The words hit him like a physical blow. He actually stumbled back, face contorted with shock and rage. What did you do? What you made necessary? The nurse, bless her, stepped between us. Sir, you need to leave now. Security will escort you out if necessary. Marcus looked at me one more time, searching for something. Regret, maybe, or hesitation, or any sign that I didn't mean it. But I met his gaze steadily, and whatever he saw there made him finally understand. It was over. He grabbed his tablet from the nightstand and walked out without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and suddenly the room felt bigger, quieter, lighter. You okay? The doctor asked gently. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure it was true. But I would be, eventually. All right then, she said, moving to the end of the bed and settling into position. Let's meet your daughter. Pushing a baby into the world is the closest thing to dying without actually dying. That's what my grandmother used to say. She'd had 6 children, buried 2 of them, and raised the rest through Jim Crow and redlining and every kind of hardship a black woman in the South could face. Childbirth teaches you what you're made of, she'd told me once. Shows you whether you're the kind of woman who breaks or the kind who bends. I was about to find out which one I was. Okay, Amina, Dr. Mitchell said, positioned between my legs with the calm authority of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. On the next contraction, I need you to push. Take a deep breath, curl forward, and give me everything you've got. Can you do that? I nodded, gripping the bed rails. The nurse with the box braids, her name tag said Keisha, was on my left, wiping my forehead with a cool cloth. Another nurse I hadn't met before was on my right, holding my hand even though I didn't remember reaching for it. "You're doing amazing," Keisha said softly. "Your baby's almost here." The contraction built slowly, like a wave gathering strength offshore. I could feel it starting in my back, spreading around my sides, tightening everything until my entire body was consumed with the single primal urge to push. "Now," Dr. Mitchell commanded. "Push." I bore down with everything I had, curling forward, feeling my daughter move through me in ways that defied description. It was pain and pressure and power all at once. It was my body doing exactly what it was designed to do, even though my mind was screaming that this was impossible, that I couldn't do it, that I was going to break. "Good," Dr. Mitchell said. "That's good. I can see her head. One more like that." I collapsed back against the pillows, gasping. Sweat poured down my face, soaked through my gown. Every muscle in my body was trembling. "I can't," I panted. "I can't do it." "Yes, you can," Keisha said firmly. "You are doing it. She's right there, Amina. Your baby girl is right there." Another contraction hit before I was ready, and I screamed. Not the controlled, breathing through it sounds I'd been making all day, but a raw animal sound that came from somewhere deep inside me. The kind of sound that didn't care about dignity or composure or what anyone thought. "Push," Dr. Mitchell said again. "Come on, Mama." "Bring her home," I pushed. Pushed past the pain, past the fear, past everything except the need to meet my daughter, to hold her, to look her in the eyes and tell her that she was loved, that she was wanted, that she was worth every second of this agony. "Heads out," Dr. Mitchell announced. "One more push for the shoulders." I didn't think I had another push in me. Didn't think my body had anything left to give. But somehow when the next contraction came, I found something, some reserve of strength I didn't know existed. And I pushed one final time. And then she was here. The room exploded with movement and sound. Dr. Mitchell lifted my daughter onto my chest, and suddenly nothing else mattered. Not Marcus, not Zora, not the messages or the lies or the broken promises, just her. She was perfect. Tiny and wrinkled and covered in vernix, with a head full of dark hair and eyes that struggled to open in the bright hospital lights. She let out a thin, indignant wail, and I started crying, sobbing, really, pressing my lips to her forehead and breathing in that newborn smell that I'd helped bring into the world so many times but had never experienced as a mother. "Hi, baby," I whispered. "Hi, sweet girl. I'm your mama. I've been waiting for you." She quieted at the sound of my voice, turning her head toward me instinctively, looking for comfort, looking for safety, looking for the person who'd been her whole world for the last 9 months, looking for me. 10 fingers, 10 toes, Keisha said, doing a quick assessment. "She's beautiful, Mama. Absolutely beautiful." I couldn't stop touching her, couldn't stop tracing the curve of her cheek, the tiny shell of her ear, the impossibly small fingers that wrapped instinctively around my thumb. This was my daughter, my Amara, the person I'd made with my body, carried through every hard day, protected with every decision. They let me hold her for a few minutes before Keisha gently took her to the warming table to finish the assessments. I watched her every second, tracking her across the room like a predator watches prey. Protective, vigilant, ready to destroy anyone who tried to hurt her. That's when the door opened. I knew it was Marcus before I even looked. Knew from the hesitant way the door cracked open, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be there, like he thought maybe I'd changed my mind in the last 30 minutes, had suddenly decided that his betrayal didn't matter. "Amina," he said softly, stepping inside. His eyes went immediately to the warming table, where Keisha was measuring Amara's length. Is she okay?" "She's perfect," I said. My voice was hoarse from screaming, but steady. He took a few steps closer, and I saw his face change when he got his first real look at her. Saw something that might have been love, or might have been regret, or might have been the dawning realization of everything he'd just lost. "Can I hold her?" he asked. "No." The word came out flat and final. He stopped walking, looked at me like I'd slapped him. Amina, come on. She's my daughter too. Is she? He blinked confused. What? I'm asking if she's your daughter. Because as far as the state of Georgia is concerned, she's not. She's mine. Amara Grace Cole, my last name. My daughter. I watched him process this. Saw his jaw tighten as anger flashed across his face. You can't do that. That's illegal. I have rights. You have the right to establish paternity, I said calmly. The nurse in me knew the law. I'd looked it up months ago, back when I still thought Marcus and I would be together forever. You can request a DNA test and petition the court to be added to the birth certificate. But until you do that, you're just a man who showed up 3 hours late to the birth of a baby that isn't legally yours. This is insane. He ran his hand over his head, pacing at the foot of my bed. You're punishing me. You're using our daughter to get back at me for cheating on me, I finished. For lying to me for 7 months. For making me feel crazy every time I questioned whether you were really working late or really at a client dinner. For being with another woman while I was in labor with your child. It was a mistake, he said desperately. I messed up. I know that. But you can't keep me from my daughter because of it. That's not fair to her. You want to talk about fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Was it fair that I spent 9 months preparing to raise a child with a partner who was never really present? Was it fair that I drove myself to this hospital alone while you were ignoring my calls? Was it fair that I had to find out about Zora by reading your messages during active labor? He didn't have an answer for that. Just stood there, looking between me and Amara like he couldn't understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Keisha finished with Amara and brought her back to me, placing her carefully in my arms. My daughter made a small sound, not quite a cry, more like a question, and I adjusted her position, supporting her head the way I'd taught 100 new mothers to do. She's 7 pounds, 4 ounces, Keisha said, 20 inches long. Perfect APGAR scores. She's a strong girl. Like her mama, I murmured, kissing Amara's forehead. Marcus moved closer, reaching out tentatively. Can I at least touch her? Please? I looked down at my daughter, at her tiny, perfect face, at the way she'd already started rooting against my chest, looking for comfort, looking for home. And I thought about what it would mean to let him in. Not legally, that ship had sailed, but emotionally. What it would mean to share custody with a man I couldn't trust, to hand my daughter over to him every other weekend, never knowing if he was actually caring for her, or if he was distracted, negligent, putting her second the way he'd put me second for months. The thought made my chest tighten with panic. No, I said quietly. I need you to leave. Amina, I need you to leave, I repeated louder this time. And I need you to understand that this isn't about revenge or punishment or being vindictive. This is about protection. I am protecting my daughter from a father who doesn't know how to show up, who doesn't know how to be present, who thinks love is just showing up sometimes with flowers and apologies. That's not fair, he said, voice breaking. You're not giving me a chance. You had a chance. You had 9 months of chances. You wasted every single one. Dr. Mitchell, who'd been quietly finishing paperwork in the corner, stood up. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The patient needs rest, and you're causing distress. Marcus looked at me one more time, and I saw tears in his eyes. Real tears. Maybe he did love me in his own limited way. Maybe he did regret what he'd done. Maybe he was genuinely devastated by what he was losing. But it didn't matter. Love without respect was worthless. Regret without change was meaningless, and I wasn't going to sacrifice my peace or my daughter's well-being for a man who'd proven over and over that he wasn't capable of being what we needed. Goodbye. Marcus, I said. He stood there for another moment, then turned and walked out. The door closed behind him, and this time, I knew he wouldn't be back. Not today. Maybe not ever, and I was okay with that. The hardest part about ending something isn't the ending itself. It's the moment right after, when the adrenaline fades and you're left alone with the consequences of your decision, when you have to sit with the reality of what you've just done and ask yourself if you made the right choice. I sat there holding Amara, listening to the sound of Marcus's footsteps fade down the hallway, and I waited for the doubt to come. Waited for the voice in my head that would tell me I'd been too harsh, too unforgiving, too cruel. The voice that had talked me out of confronting him 100 times before, that had convinced me to give him another chance, to believe his excuses, to accept less than I deserved. But that voice never came. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Maybe years. Peace. Amara stirred against my chest, making those small newborn sounds that weren't quite crying, but weren't quite contentment either. She was trying to figure out this new world she'd been thrust into. The bright lights, the cool air, the voices that weren't muffled through water and skin anymore. "You're okay, sweet girl," I whispered, adjusting her blanket. "You're safe. Mama's got you." Keisha came back in, her expression carefully neutral. "You need anything? Water? Pain medication?" "I'm good," I said. Then, because I knew she'd witnessed everything. "Thank you. For before?" She nodded, understanding what I meant. "I've seen a lot of deliveries, a lot of situations. You did what you needed to do. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about that." After she left, I was alone with my daughter. Really alone. No Marcus hovering in the corner. No tablet buzzing with messages. No performance to maintain or feelings to protect. Just me and Amara, and the quiet hum of the hospital at night. I looked down at her face. So peaceful. So unaware of the chaos she'd been born into, and I made her a promise. "I'm going to do better," I told her. "I'm going to show you what love actually looks like. Real love. The kind that shows up. The kind that keeps its promises. The kind that doesn't make you feel like you have to shrink yourself or accept less or compete for attention." She yawned. A tiny, perfect yawn that made my heart squeeze. "I'm going to teach you that you're enough, just as you are. That you don't need to change or perform or be convenient for anyone. That the right people will love you without conditions, without hesitation, without making you guess whether you matter." My phone, which I'd turned back on to call my best friend Tasha, started buzzing. Messages flooding in. I ignored them, but I could see the preview texts lighting up the screen. "Marcus. We need to talk, please, Marcus. I'm not giving up on us, Marcus. You can't keep me from my daughter, Marcus. I'll get a lawyer if I have to." There it was. The threat. The anger. The entitlement. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I understand why you're hurt." Not, "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." Just threats and demands and the assumption that he had any right to anything. After what he'd done. I took a screenshot of the messages. Saved them to a folder I'd already created titled Legal. Because I knew this wasn't over. Knew Marcus well enough to understand that his ego wouldn't let him walk away quietly. That he'd fight. Not because he actually wanted to be a father, but because he couldn't stand losing control. But I was ready. I'd already called a family lawyer my grandmother had recommended years ago. Had already documented everything. The messages from Zora, the timeline of his absence, the birth certificate without his name. I had witnesses. I had evidence. I had the law on my side. Most importantly, I had clarity. Another message came through, but this one wasn't from Marcus. "Tasha. Just parked. Coming up now. You better have that baby in your arms so I can meet my goddaughter." I smiled. Real support. The kind that showed up without being asked. The kind that didn't need to be convinced or cajoled or reminded. Tasha had been at work when I texted her that I was in labor, and she'd left immediately. No questions asked. That's what love looked like. 2 minutes later, she burst through the door, still in her scrubs from her shift at Grady Hospital, carrying a stuffed elephant and a bag from my favorite soul food spot. "Girl," she said, rushing to my bedside. "Let me see her. Let me see my baby." I turned slightly so she could see Amara's face, and Tasha's whole expression melted. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Amina, she's perfect. She looks just like you." "You think so? Are you kidding? That's your nose, your mouth, your everything. She's all you, babe." Something about hearing that made me emotional, made me realize how much I'd been dreading seeing Marcus in my daughter's face. How relieved I was that she looked like me, like my grandmother, like the women in my family who'd survived everything and came out stronger. Tasha pulled up a chair, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Where's Marcus?" "Gone." Gone? Or gone, "I'll be back with coffee" gone? Gone. She studied my face, reading everything I wasn't saying. What happened? So I told her about the tablet, about Zora, about the messages dating back 7 months, about Marcus showing up late with flowers and lies, about the birth certificate, about telling him to leave. Tasha listened without interrupting, her jaw getting tighter with every sentence. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You know I love you," she finally said. "I know. And you know I always try to see the best in people, give them the benefit of the doubt. I know that too. But fuck Marcus Reed. Fuck him and his whole lying, cheating, narcissistic existence. You did the right thing, Amina, the only thing. And if he comes around here talking about lawyers or rights or any of that bullshit, you call me. I will handle it," I laughed, even though I was crying. "You're a pediatric nurse, Tasha, not a bodyguard. I'm a black woman from Pittsburgh who grew up with 3 brothers. I can be both." Amara chose that moment to start fussing, and Tasha immediately stood up. "You need help? You want me to take her so you can rest?" "No," I said, adjusting my hold. "I got her, and I did. Maybe I didn't have experience being a mother yet. Maybe I'd make mistakes and have moments of doubt and days when I felt completely overwhelmed. But I had something more important than experience. I had commitment. The kind Marcus had never given me. The kind my daughter deserved." Tasha settled back in her chair, watching me with something that looked like pride. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you right now. You know that? You think so?" "I know so. She raised you to be strong, to not take shit from anyone, to know your worth." She paused. "She also told me right before she died to keep an eye on Marcus. Said he had slippery energy." Her exact words. I smiled through my tears. "Of course she did. She also told me that you were going to be an amazing mother, that you had the kind of strength that looks quiet until it needs to be loud, that you'd know when to bend and when to break." Tasha leaned forward. "Today you broke, and it was exactly what needed to happen." We sat there in comfortable silence, my best friend and my daughter and me. No drama, no lies, no performance, just love in its simplest, purest form. My phone buzzed again. More messages from Marcus. I didn't read them. Didn't need to. Whatever he had to say, whatever promises or threats or manipulations he was preparing, it didn't matter. I'd already made my choice. I'd chosen Amara. Chosen myself. Chosen the life I wanted to build instead of the one Marcus wanted to control. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. "You know he's going to keep trying," Tasha said quietly. "He's going to apologize and beg and do everything he can to make you feel like you're being unreasonable." "I know. And you need to stay strong. Not just for Amara, but for you, because you deserve better than what he gave you. You always have." "I know that too." I looked down at my daughter, at the future I was choosing for both of us. I'm done accepting less, done making excuses, done pretending that love is supposed to hurt this much. "Good," Tasha said firmly, "because it's not. Love is supposed to feel like this." She gestured to the space between us, the easy comfort, the unconditional support, not like a constant battle to prove you're worth someone's time. Amara made a small cooing sound, and both Tasha and I leaned in instinctively. "Did you hear that?" Tasha whispered. "She's already got something to say. That's my goddaughter." I laughed, kissed Amara's forehead, and let myself feel it. The relief, the freedom, the bone-deep certainty that I'd done the right thing. Marcus Reed had given me a lot of things over the last 2 years. Beautiful words, empty promises, a daughter I loved more than anything. But the most valuable thing he'd given me, though he'd never know it, was the push I needed to finally choose myself. And for that, I was almost grateful. Almost. They say the first night with a newborn is the hardest. Not because of the crying or the feeding or the overwhelming responsibility of keeping another human alive, but because of the silence between those moments, the dark hours when everyone else is asleep and you're alone with your thoughts, processing everything that's happened, wondering if you're ready for what comes next. I wasn't afraid of the silence anymore. Tasha had stayed until visiting hours ended, helping me figure out breastfeeding, showing me how to swaddle Amara properly, making me laugh when I needed it most. But now it was just after midnight, and the hospital had settled into that particular kind of quiet that only exists in medical buildings at night. Machines beeping softly, footsteps in distant hallways, the low murmur of nurses at their station. Amara was asleep in the bassinet beside my bed, one tiny fist pressed against her cheek. I'd been watching her for the last hour, still not quite believing she was real. That I'd made her. That she was mine. My phone buzzed on the bedside table. I'd been ignoring it all evening, but curiosity finally got the better of me. I picked it up, expecting more messages from Marcus. Instead, there was one from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Zora. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, my heart rate picking up. Of all the people I'd expected to hear from tonight, she wasn't one of them. Another message came through. "I just found out about the baby. About you. Marcus told me you two weren't together anymore. That it was complicated but over." Of course he did. I'm not trying to cause problems. I just need to know the truth, please. I should have deleted the messages, should have blocked the number and gone back to watching my daughter sleep. But something in me needed to respond. Needed to close this chapter completely. I typed slowly, choosing each word carefully. The truth is that Marcus has been lying to both of us. I didn't know about you until today, during labor. He's been living a double life, and we were both foolish enough to believe him. The response came back almost immediately. "I feel sick. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I believe you. But now you do know. So what you do next is on you." There was a long pause. I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear several times before her next message came through. "I'm so sorry. For everything. You didn't deserve this." No, I didn't. But I'm grateful it happened now instead of 5 years from now. Instead of after we got married or bought a house or built a life I couldn't easily walk away from. What are you going to do? I looked at Amara, at her perfect, peaceful face, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. I'm going to raise my daughter. I'm going to love her with everything I have. I'm going to show her what it means to be strong and whole and complete all by yourself. And I'm going to build a life that doesn't include Marcus Reed in any capacity except what the court mandates. You're braver than me. I don't think I could do it alone. You're not me. And you're not alone unless you choose to be. But I'll tell you this. Being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel alone. Remember that. She didn't respond after that, and I didn't expect her to. I'd said what I needed to say. Whatever she decided to do with Marcus was her choice, her lesson to learn. I'd learned mine. I deleted the conversation, blocked the number, and set my phone face down on the table. Done. Amara stirred, making small sounds that I was already learning to interpret. Hungry sounds. I picked her up carefully, settled her against my chest, and helped her latch. The sensation was strange and uncomfortable, and absolutely perfect all at once. Your daddy's going to try to come back, I told her softly. He's going to say he's changed, that he's sorry, that he wants to be a family. And part of me, a small part, might want to believe him. Might want to give you the 2-parent home I always imagined for you. She suckled contentedly, her tiny hand resting against my breast. But I won't do it, because you deserve better than a father who only shows up when it's convenient. Better than a man who treats commitment like it's optional. Better than watching your mother accept disrespect and teaching you that love is supposed to hurt. I stroked her soft hair, marveling at how something so small could make me feel so strong. I'm going to mess up sometimes. I'm going to be tired and overwhelmed and unsure. I'm going to have days when I wonder if I made the right choice. When I look at your face and wish you had a father who loved you the way you deserve to be loved. She'd stopped nursing, fallen asleep against me with milk-drunk contentment. I burped her gently, then held her against my shoulder, swaying slightly even though she was already asleep. But then, I'll remember this moment, this choice, this feeling of choosing us over comfort, and I'll know I did the right thing. The night nurse poked her head in, checking on us. She smiled when she saw us together. You're doing great, Mama, she whispered. Get some rest. I'll keep an ear out for you. After she left, I carefully placed Amara back in the bassinet. She didn't stir, completely trusting, completely at peace. I lay back against my pillows, exhausted in ways I didn't know were possible. But I wasn't empty. I was full of love and purpose and determination. My phone buzzed one more time. Marcus again. I didn't read the message. Didn't need to. Instead, I opened my contacts and did something I should have done months ago. I blocked his number. Not out of anger, though there was plenty of that. Not out of revenge, though I'd earned the right. But out of protection. Out of love for myself and my daughter. Out of the recognition that some people don't deserve access to your life, no matter how much history you share. The block went through, and I felt something release in my chest. A tension I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was there. I thought about my grandmother, about all the women in my family who'd had to be strong when they wanted to fall apart, who'd raised children alone and worked 2 jobs and smiled through exhaustion because that's what you did. That's what survival looked like. But this wasn't just survival. This was choice. Active, intentional choice. I was choosing peace over chaos, choosing self-respect over false security, choosing to be alone rather than lonely in a relationship, choosing to show my daughter, from her very first day of life, what it looked like to know your worth. The sun was starting to rise, painting the hospital room in shades of pink and gold. A new day, a new beginning, a new chapter in a story that was finally, completely mine. Amara woke up crying, and I picked her up without hesitation, without resentment, without wishing someone else was there to help. Because this was my job now, my honor, my purpose. "Good morning, baby girl," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Welcome to day 1, the first day of the rest of our lives." She looked at me with those dark, unfocused newborn eyes, and I swear she saw me, really saw me, saw the woman I was becoming, the mother I'd always been meant to be, strong, whole, complete. I changed her diaper, fed her again, sang her a song my grandmother used to sing to me. And as I held her against my chest, feeling her heartbeat sync with mine, I realized something profound. I wasn't broken. I wasn't damaged. I wasn't less than because I was alone. I was free. Free from lies and manipulation and loving someone who didn't know how to love me back. Free from making myself smaller to make someone else comfortable. Free from the exhausting work of trying to earn what should have been freely given. Marcus Reed had taken a lot from me. My trust, my time, 2 years of my life I'd never get back. But he hadn't taken my strength, hadn't taken my dignity, hadn't taken my capacity to love fully and deeply and without reservation, and he certainly hadn't taken my future. That belonged to me and Amara now. To the life we'd build together. To the lessons I'd teach her about what love actually looked like. To the example I'd set, day after day, year after year, of what it meant to choose yourself without apology. The morning nurse came in with breakfast and discharge papers. "Ready to take this little one home?" she asked, smiling at Amara. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. Not just ready to leave the hospital, but ready for everything that came next. The sleepless nights and the endless questions and the moments of doubt. The joy and the fear and the overwhelming responsibility of raising a human being. I was ready. Because I wasn't doing it for someone else's approval or to prove anything to anyone. I was doing it for her, for Amara Grace Cole. The daughter who'd saved me by showing me exactly who I needed to be. As I signed the discharge papers, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked tired. My hair was a mess. I was wearing a hospital gown and had dark circles under my eyes. But I also looked powerful, certain, free. I looked like a woman who'd walked through fire and chosen to keep walking. Like a mother. Like someone who'd finally learned that the only person who needed to choose her was herself. And in that moment, holding my daughter in my arms as sunlight flooded the room, I smiled, not because everything was perfect, not because I had all the answers, not because the road ahead would be easy, but because I'd finally learned what my grandmother had been trying to teach me all along. Silence wasn't weakness. It was the space where you found your voice, and mine, ours, was just beginning.